always liken it to fiddle. Fiddle came into Irish music via the virtuoso classical music which developed in Europe. And as part of that, a method for holding the violin or the fiddle developed, and there is a kind of a correct way to hold the fiddle. So everybody kind of knows that there's a correct way to hold the fiddle. And the same is true for flute, piano, etc., etc. But it never developed for the banjo. One theory is simply because of the way the banjo came into Irish music. First time it appeared in Ireland would have been the Virginia minstrels in the 1850s. And I mean, you know, not to get political about it, but the minstrel groups were white guys, you know, dressing up as the African American musicians. So when it came into the Irish tradition in that sense, it didn't come through this tradition of virtuosity. And if you were to take Irish banjo playing, you know, it's 2009, Arnie McKenna in the 60s was the first guy to tune it like a fiddle and to really start playing it in Irish music 60s. So, I'm talking about the Germans. I was recently trying to learn a little bit of ragtime playing, and at a banjo festival in Bath. And the guy that runs it is a very, very strange man. He's an academic. He's really nice, very kind guy, but he's really blunt and very bizarre. He's a very strange, removed from reality type of individual, but really nice guy. So I was doing a workshop, and I was showing him a little bit of how to do the Irish stuff. And I said, "What do you think of, you know, my ragtime method? You know, that's kind of." And he goes, "Frankly, Enda, it's German." That's a huge insult. The question is actually holding the banjo. Well, the banjo is a big, physical, awkward instrument, particularly if you're on the smaller side. They're heavy. They want to slip off your lap. So, if you're holding the banjo and you want to be able to do so in the most relaxed kind of way. Okay. I should probably preface the entire weekend thing by saying that relaxation, physical relaxation, when you're playing is the most important thing that you can start to develop. And it's really an issue of kind of becoming conscious of your own body when you're playing. Become conscious of your own muscles and where you're stressed. And we'll talk about that constantly over the course of the weekend. So the entire framework for holding the banjo, it's important to look at it in that context. So if you need a strap, you know, if you find that the banjo is slipping or sliding, or you have to actually engage muscles in order to pull it onto your lap, then a strap can be a good idea. And most kids, I reckon, should have straps until they're big enough for the banjo to just literally sit as it is, you know. And depending on the chair that you're in, these ones aren't kind of slope backwards. They're not the best, but you know, maybe cock up a leg just so that the banjo is self-supporting. Now, there's kind of the two main ways that you see people playing, and one is kind of flat in your lap, or the other way is tucked onto one hip. Okay. I generally play like this. This can be quite comfortable. It's a more relaxed position, but it throws your right arm out of shape. Your elbow ends up sticking out. So I find that it's better to have it flat between your two legs. Now, the most comfortable position is to have it at this kind of angle. That's probably 45, is it? So, you know, between 25 and 30 degrees, I think, to put a number on it. Now, you will find that for people that are learning, you know, they like to have it up here where they can keep an eye on it. And you can physically see your left hand, you know. The problem with that, and we'll get onto the right hand in detail in a minute, is that in order to get the pick straight onto the strings, you're going to have to twist your right arm. Okay? So it's a good idea to drop the banjo down to about 25 degrees, so that it's comfortable and that your elbow. You can also use the thumb for clamping on a note on the bottom from time to time. that's it. Where all the fun starts. Or where it all starts to go wrong. So the right hand really is the engine, it's where it all happens. You can get away with all sorts of stuff on the left hand, and the right hand is really where you start to run into problems. So again, we're looking at it from the whole point of view of relaxation being the most important aspect that you can bring to banjo. So you have to kind of, what I've done, I suppose, what I recommend doing is to look at how you're holding the whole thing, the banjo, the pick, and how you get your hand and your arm onto the banjo to maximize relaxation or minimize tension. I think about it. Okay? So what you effectively want to produce is a way of attaching your hand to the banjo so that when you come to do physical picking, your hand is incredibly relaxed and you're not squeezing the pick. Okay? So you'll see a lot of kind of pressing on with the fingers and various. There's a guy in Ireland, he tells everybody, kids that I teach come back from a weekend workshop, and he's been telling them to clamp their little finger onto the bridge and hold it on there, and if I ever use them, I'll break the little finger. Delete that. So, I suppose we'll come back to the placement of the banjo. So we have the neck nicely aligned. What you want to do is get your right hand onto the banjo, and I recommend that you actually you need to physically attach your hand. I know I'm jumping all over the place here because this is factors that all impact on each other. The wrist is the most natural hinge. Okay, so all your plucking work needs to come from the wrist. Okay, so that has to be free to move. A good little trick, you probably did it, you hold out your left hand just as a base, just from an example point of view. And place your actual hand, not your wrist. If we call the wrist just a hinge, and this is your upper forearm. Place your hand onto your wrist, onto your fist, just as a base, and let your elbow completely relax. Okay. Now you can move your wrist now very, very loosely. Okay. And that's the kind of idea. That's the amount of support that your hand needs on the banjo, so that you can relax your elbow. Okay. Does that make sense? And that keeps your wrist very, very light. Okay. Now, if you were to squeeze your hand and try and move your wrist, the whole thing is completely constricted. Now, it's a good idea to squeeze and just run your mind or run your hand up along your arm, and you'll see that by squeezing down here, all the muscles, this one at the back of the hand and right up into the shoulder, all become engaged. Okay, there's two tendons that run from the back of your neck, and they run through your elbow, and they operate these two fingers and these two fingers of the thumb. Okay, so when you clench here, you clench your shoulder, and the opposite is true. If you hunch your shoulders in a little way, you're impacting on your hand. Okay, again, jumping all over this. So what you want to do is try and align your hand and your arm with the banjo in the most comfortable possible way. And what you want to achieve is that the pick, and we're going to move on to actually holding the pick in a second, is that the pick is perpendicular to the strings and is more or less straight on. Okay, so you don't want the pick to be coming at the strings at an angle or side to side like that, because that just makes life more difficult for plucking. So this is a question of moving the banjo, moving the arm, so that you can get the correct alignment. Am I making any sense? Okay. Now what I recommend is that this part here is like the bit that you use for doing the karate chop on the hand. That you use that to anchor the hand to the banjo. Okay, so that's the part of the hand that's going to be on the actual banjo. It's absolutely fine to have it on the strings behind the bridge. It will affect the tone, but maybe only 5%. tiny notes. And the benefit of having the hand supported there. But we're all kind of big enough, I'd say, that you should be able to get it onto the tailpiece of the banjo. So you sit it onto the tailpiece, and in effect then your palm is kind of arched over the bridge. So you're giving clearance to the bridge. So it's very important, obviously, that you don't put your hand on the bridge, because that totally kills the tone. The difference in tone from a completely open to putting your hand on the tailpiece are really minuscule, and even to the strings behind the bridge. If anything, it improves it. So you're not going to lose that much. Whereas if you touch the bridge,
so you never move your hand in this direction while you're playing. Stay so, because some people try to take it like a different.
Oh no, you can. That's fine. Yeah. No, I would do that, but that's just to get a bit of dynamic. But I would find it now if I was playing. You can do it, and that's just to produce the dynamic effect. But it's much harder up there. It's very hard to treble when you're up there. The hand is completely unsupported. So try and get that. There's a nice little bony part of the hand. I'll talk about the one that I don't like first, which is this one, and I'll explain why I don't like it. The reason that I don't like this pick hold, and I get applying German logic to it, is that to actually hold the plectrum in place, these two fingers are acting in that direction. Okay, so even though it might only be a small muscle action, they actually have to press in that direction, and the thumb then has to press in the opposite direction. So just to hold the pick in place requires a substantial amount of squeezing. Now, to exaggerate it, squeeze the neck, and your entire arm, hand, wrist, the whole arm right up to your shoulder is engaged. Okay. Now, if you watch guys that play like that, a good majority of them, a good percentage of them, have very, very stressed wrists. Okay. Now, the way that I hold it, and as I said, I just held it like this naturally. Maybe that's why it's called a natural grip point. I consider myself lucky. Is to place the pick on the outside edge of your index finger. Now, the reason that logically this makes sense to me is that doesn't go anywhere. Okay. Unless you've got some really, really weird joint on your finger. So when you put the pick on it and put your thumb over it, the only action that's required to hold it in place is the downward action of your thumb. And because you're playing like this, that's also known as gravity. Okay. So you've completely minimized the muscle effort required to hold the pick.
In what direction? In what angle is?
Run a triplet. The pick is moving like that all the time. Tiniest little movement like that with the thumb when I'm doing triplets and trebles. So I would have found like that. Again, it's just creating a little tiny bit of unnecessary tension there. And the plectrum then is, as I said, relatively perpendicular, okay, and relatively straight, so that it's not over to the side. That would be the perpendicular one, and it's not kind of at an angle like that. Now, as I said, it's relatively straight. It's not going to be perfect. I would have drawn the comparison and said, or there's roughly a straight line going down the neck from your elbow to the, but obviously it's not, because you need to have a banjo down like that in order to generate that, but it's a guideline. It's so that it's not like that. So maybe coming back to Tor just as an example, what I would always have said, and I think it's always hilarious teaching kids, and they're, if the pick isn't straight on the string, or their elbows twisted like that, okay? And I'd say, move the neck of the banjo down so that the pick is straight. And invariably they do this. Put your body back the way it was. No, just move the neck. So, move the banjo to suit your right hand. Okay? So, Get back to the finger thing. That is having it stuck out. It's the effort that's required to keep them out will work against you, and it's pure habit. And I know it myself. I used to play with them loosely curled in, and now they kind of drag around the banjo a little bit. I suppose to avoid at all costs pressing. If you press down onto the head, you've created a whole other angle, a whole other force that's going on there. And you will see a lot of players that play like that, and they tend, in the main, to be very, very jerky, awkward kind of playing, because everything is going in it's almost like rotation. I After you've all that in place, you have to remember then to relax again, and relax the shoulders, particularly when you're doing something new, because you tend to kind of crouch over, try to keep an eye on things. So, relax again, because, and this is the harder you try and the harder you concentrate, the more you'll have a tendency to kind of squeeze and tense up. So it's a good idea to take a deep breath. Probably the most important thing I learned, and I'm doing a whole talk on it tomorrow, when Ken sent us over the class numbers, and I was looking down, we're having problems, they were missing triplets, they were getting stuck on notes, the rhythm was all over the place. And I taught them this way of plucking and put together a couple of exercises and that to train the right hand. And they're playing improved. And in competition terms, which is obviously not what it's about, but it was from being able to just about qualify out of a county flat, to be able to get through to an All-Ireland and do well at that level. And that's the difference that it made. Well, this morning we spoke about relaxation, setting up the body so that we're properly aligned with the banjo and all that. And that stuff is really, really important, how to hold it. After that, the next most important thing is that you're picking in a regulated fashion. What happens with a lot of players is that they're picking, and it's a little bit like they don't know what the right hand is doing. So they do one note on the down, the next note might be a down, or it might be an up. And the next time you do it, it could be the opposite way around. They'll do a triplet one day, down, up, down, and the next day they'll do it up, up, down. And so there's no regulation. Now recently I started to liken it to playing a barroom again. Now you can imagine, if you're playing a reel on a barroom, and your most basic rhythm is down, 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 down. And you put in a long beat, okay? You would naturally do the long beat on a down, leave the gap, and do the next down beat on a down. Now, if you were to do what some banjo players do, which is to have an irregular pattern of picking, you'd be talking about playing a barrow like all over. Okay, now it makes totally logical sense in a barrow, but it doesn't seem to make as much sense when you're plucking on a banjo. And of course, add in the melody and all the rest of it that's going on. So, what I'll do, this relates solely to reel playing, so it's tunes that are in 4/4 timing. My theory on it is that if you can pick a reel, hornpipe, barn dance, fling, because they're all in the same 4/4 signature, then a jig is an awful lot easier. A jig you can do down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, or you can do down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and so on and so forth. There seems to be more room within a jig, and it doesn't trip you up as much. And if you can nail the reels, then the jig's very easy after that. So, what I'll do is run through and I kind of just explain the basics of it. As I said, it's so simple that you'll be looking at it kind of going, how could this possibly be a method? But then we'll do a few exercises and then kind of see how trained the right hand actually is. if you see